Welcome to our American Mussar weekly gathering. Today will be our second week on the soul trait of order, which for those some of you may know means in Hebrew, the translation is Seder. And Seder is what we have during Passover. And we are in the middle of Passover. So after today, after our Mussar discussion at 5 o'clock, we'll have some bonus time where I have a little bit of just kind of interesting information about Passover to share from the earliest documented um, recording of what a Passover Seder was like from 1800 years ago. And I found it astounding to see how recognizable it is to what we do today. So for now, though, we will begin as we always do with a short meditation. So I invite you to relax and close your eyes and take in a deep breath through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. And again, inhale through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. If thoughts should come into your head, just observe them and let them go, like watching a car move past on the road. Now is not the time for solving problems. Right now, all you need to do is inhale through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. And on your next inhale, say to yourself, Shema. And on the exhale, listen. Shema, listen. In Shema, we're listening deeply, without judgment, without offering advice. In Shema, we are listening with an open heart. Shema, listen. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes. Well, welcome Bonnie and Marianne and Stephanie and Harry and Karen and Kaya and Joanne, who I know as many of you have been here even before we started, but I didn't have a chance to say hi to everyone. So hello, welcome. Let's jump right in. So when we met 2 weeks ago, we were talking about order. And if you were here or if you watched the video, one of the things that you discussed with your Havruta was maybe what are some routines or that you had today that you could maybe apply in new situations to help you practice order, to help you establish things. So I'm curious, did you try a practice, either something based on that discussion or otherwise? And regardless, how has order shown up for you in the last couple of weeks, besides your Seder on Monday or Tuesday or whenever it may or may not have been? Who would like to share? Yes, Marianne.
This may not have been the intention for order, but what I did is my thoughts in my head are so disordered and just all over scattered, and so it's a lot of worrying about what I have to do and get done. So what I did is I just put it in my calendar, and I got reminded from my phone what I had to do, so I didn't have to think all the time about what's coming up. What do I have to do next? So that was helpful.
That's a fantastic order practice. Planning is definitely right in the heart of for an order practice. So well done. Thank you so much for sharing that. Bonnie.
Well, I have had this similar situation that Mariana has, which is the squirrel thinking, "Oh my gosh, there's a nut over there. I've got to get it. Oh, yeah, but there's a piece of grass, and so I might as well mow the lawn before I get the nut." And as early as I seem to start getting ready for Pesach, it's never early enough. I don't quite understand it. 85% of the things I need are now in my new kitchen because we built a whole Pesach L-shaped set of cabinets. So, but I still don't start early enough. I think I do. But for me, the thing is I just took each day and said, what do I need to do last Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday? And so I really had broken it down to much smaller bites.
Mm.
And that worked for me until Shabbat. And I work so hard not to use Shabbat as a work day. So I got through about half a Shabbat without a work day, and then, yeah. So hopefully next year I'll start in 2 or 3 days earlier. The best I can do.
Yeah, thank you, Bonnie. It's really hard, especially when there's a big task. Although, as we say at the Seder, next year in Jerusalem. So maybe you'll be in Jerusalem and you won't have to do all of that stuff. Joanne.
Yeah, so I mean, I find also that no matter when I start, there's never enough time. And also, what I felt like very happy that I got the cleaning lady to come the Friday before. So she made my kitchens like so spick and span and sparkly, and I didn't have to do that. And wow, and that was such a relief. So even though I still had to change over the drawers and do, a bunch of other things on Sunday, made it more doable. Of course, I wasn't hosting anyone, so that helps a lot. But still, I had on my whiteboard, we did this first things first mantra. So, I just refrigerator door and the freezer and what I do is I can't I don't have I have a small place with a small freezer, and so what I'm not using and what's not Pesach, I just cover it up, put it in a bag, and that's, I'm considerate that I sold it to a Gentile, which I did to the rabbi. And it makes it much more manageable. And it's not perfect, but I did looking for chametz, and at the end of that, you say, whatever I didn't find is like it doesn't matter, so you kind of lets you off the hook. You don't have to beat yourself up with that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that worked well. Oh, yeah, lost my picture. Come back.
Thank you,
Here.
Joanne.
Yeah.
Chametz is this idea of leavened bread. It's related to kind of puffiness, and the rabbis often relate that to the ego, that we don't want our ego to become too big or too puffy. And so there's a whole self-reflective angle of Passover, which usually isn't in the consciousness of many people. And even me, I don't use this as a big occasion for self-reflection, although I use it maybe as a small occasion, a little bit more than I normally do. But I was reminded of that the way you said, in the stuff you don't find, we can be self-reflective, but we're still going to have our blind spots. We're still not going to see everything. We're still not going to be able to address everything. And as you said, Joanne, we don't want to beat ourselves up over that. That's just the way it is. And, would anyone else care to share the way the order showed up for them? Okay, well, we have some very juicy readings this week, so they're a little bit longer than they sometimes are. So this is okay. First I wanted to, this is a short piece, but I like this teaching from Rabbi Eliyahu Dessler. Would someone like to read the 3 reasons why he says we should practice order?
Sure, I will.
Thank you, Wendy.
Eliyahu is a nice name. Inner satisfaction and confidence that everything is under control. Helps you find things and saves time. Some things, like a clock, will only function correctly if ordered correctly.
Yeah, thank you. So is there one of
Very
these that
practical.
maybe resonates with, and I asked this to the group, that maybe resonates with you a little bit more? You know, something that you really get out of practicing order? Or are there any of these which maybe don't resonate at all?
Yeah, I like sufficiency and sufficient. When you can helps you find things and saves time.
Mhm.
When you're on deadlines all the time, you need those kinds of things in your back pocket so that you know that you can have that inner satisfaction and confidence that it takes to get
Mhm.
that thing done in the time that is allotted.
Yeah. Thank you, Wendy. Marjorie.
Well, now that Wendy mentioned deadlines, but the thing that I noticed is that it really doesn't specify you have to get things done in a really, in a specified amount of time. Although I guess you're in a workplace, or I mean, I think that there probably are things that require, a deadline, but
Mhm.
don't stress out about it. I guess. I mean, I just have to think about my realm, and it's like, well, things will get done, and I know what needs to get done, and if it does, it does, and if it doesn't, it'll happen. I'll check it off the list tomorrow. Small bites, very small bites.
Thank you. Small
That is-
bites. When I think Bonnie was talking about small bites as well, and it reminded me of a time management class that I took when I was first in the working world. And the woman who was running it, she called it, Swiss cheesing, where you just slice your task into these really thin, tiny little slices and just get one done at a time. Yes, Stephanie.
So I was thinking about the order that I was able to follow the past couple weeks, and one of them was, I think, the first sentence, what you just put up on the screen, inner
Mhm.
satisfaction. And I realized that the more peaceful I can be, the more, have this inner peace within myself, that
Mm.
I perform better with the things that I have a list of things to do. I can be more patient with myself. I can, I think, feel a little more at ease that, even if things might be too hard or difficult, that, I can get through it.
Mhm.
Somehow I can get through it. But I think for me, it's having a sense of peace, and that brings order to me. Because
Yeah.
if I'm in chaos, like everybody had mentioned before, your mind goes all over the place. You're kind of like running around like a rat in a maze. And really, for me, it's just having that inner peace that's not always easy to attain. But if I focus on that and just say, this will get done, or this will get done tomorrow, or whatever, I can handle this, that seems to help for me.
Wonderful. Thank you, Stephanie. And that reminds me, for me, order is sometimes the canary in the coal mine. Like when I start losing things, when I start forgetting things, it like means I'm like, oh, I've gotten like so like overworked and revved up that I stopped like planning, I stopped noticing things, and then I realized that I've lost my inner peace. So the order like helps me. I almost sometimes have the converse. It's like when things start to fall apart, and I'm like, oh, I've kind of gotten away from my inner peace. Joanne.
Yeah, I was just going to add that one thing I noticed, and that first things first, but I also noticed like I can't schedule too many things in one day,
Hmm,
because it gets to be overwhelming. So
hmm,
even today, is like, oh, should I try to pick up my prescriptions? And then it turned out they didn't even have them. So it was good I didn't try to get there because I had to go. I went into the city, saw my cousins. That was wonderful. And then, got back, and I still have some more things to do tonight, but um, it just made life much more manageable and not so overwhelming.
yeah.
I had made a doctor's appointment, and then I realized I had something else at the same time, so I had to reschedule that. And it's a day that nothing else is happening, and that works well for me. So,
So thank you. That's kind of the other, another one of the key pieces. Like, yeah, scheduling is great, but if you've scheduled your whole day in 15-minute increments, that doesn't work. And with the scheduling, we also need to prioritize and to have some downtime and to not overdo it. And so these are all parts of the order picture. Let's take a look at our next reading. This one is a bit longer, but I think it's sort of really, I know we've all are interested in the inner world and how that interacts with order. So may I have a volunteer to read this first bullet, please?
I'll read.
Oh,
Picture a pearl necklace with a small clasp. Which is more essential, the clasp or the pearls? At first glance, the pearls are more essential, but without the clasp, all the pearls would scatter, and all that would be left is the chain. Thus, this clasp seems more essential.
okay. Some good jewelry knowledge there. Let's keep going.
Okay, a person is like a collection of pearls, full of potential, talents, character, traits, and virtues. Order is similar to the clasp on the necklace. Without order, all one's virtues and talents scatter and one is left empty. Rabbi David Jaffe, in the name of Rabbi Shlomo Wald, explaining the words of Rabbi Simcha Zissel of Kelm, IJS Tikkun Midot, gender neutral language added by Greg Marcus.
Okay, I think that's like my personal record for like attribution. Okay, so what is this analogy? What is the point that Rabbi Jaffe is making in the name of all of these other prior generation sages?
Maybe
Yeah,
that the clasp, of the necklace, is like our having a handle on things, kind of, so that everything isn't all scattered all over the place.
yeah,
Yeah, that's what I think.
yeah, absolutely. And what are the pearls represent? What is each pearl?
Parts of a personality, talents, and you
Yeah,
know. Oh,
you could also think of them as our other soul traits.
Mm.
And so this idea is that they can all be on the necklace, but if you don't have this clasp, they're just going to kind of scatter and go all over the place. So what do people think of that analogy? Does that work for you? Does that not work for you? Is it so obvious it's not particularly helpful? How does that fit in? Yes, Wendy.
Well, I don't want I don't want to be negative, but I'm thinking that you can't always depend on the clasp. You can't always depend on order that you think you are going to have. Right before we went to Kentucky, a grant came up, and it was really good. And so, I was going on vacation, but I said, well, this is great because I have 4 or 5 hours on the plane. I'll just write it on the plane. And we had turbulence the whole way, so I couldn't write. So I had to, maybe then you use those other pearls that would be the midot to help you get back so that you can hit the whole necklace and the clasp once again. Once your order is kind of shattered, taken away in some way, then you can use those pearls, your talents, your wisdom, and get that order back.
Mm.
What I'm thinking.
Yeah, so it's maybe a little more interactive than just a clasp and pearls, that there's some harmony and back and forth. Great. Any other comments?
Well,
Yeah, yes.
I had a thought that, if the clasp does break, and you've got this nice string of pearls, everything's all orderly, right in line. The clasp does break though, you have the opportunity to reestablish like, I think I'm probably reiterating what was said, but you do have the opportunity to reestablish an order, create a different order.
Yeah.
And maybe it'll be the same, all in a nice little line. Maybe you've lost a few, then you have to replace it with a different type of stone or something. So that just came into my just thinking. I thought, but I do like that visual of like when you see jewelry, especially, and I'm a very symmetrical person. I can't put a piece of furniture at an angle in a room.
Mhm.
Everything's got to be very so. Order's it's big in a physical way, and list making, and yeah, you never know it sometimes, but I do try to maintain an order. And I was just looking at the book with the continuum about obsessive, and it's like sometimes I'm like, oh God, am I like going towards that end? It's like bring it back to middle.
Yeah. I think like the rabbis of the 19th century, they sometimes can be very binary. And this feels a little bit like a binary teaching. You're either like have a nice orderly clasp and everything's in its place, or things are scattered and you're just, it's all out the window and it's pandemonium and chaos. And as Wendy kind of pointed out, it's like, well, yeah, things go off the rails a little bit or things don't go according to plan, but it's not like it's all, you know, out the window either. All right, well, I found a really nice complimentary reading from Rabbi Shefa Gold. We'll take a look at that and then we'll go for our breakout groups. So she wrote this book, Torah Journeys, where she does like a spiritual commentary on each of the weekly Torah portions. And so this is about the first one in the book of Numbers. And may I have a volunteer to read this? Maybe someone we haven't heard from today.
I will.
Okay, great. Thank you.
My soul is at the center of the tabernacle, guarded and surrounded by the part of me that is mindful of holiness. And that circle is surrounded by the circle of my personality. Each aspect stands in its place, knowing that the divine spark in the center is in charge. But the challenge is that every one of the voices that clamor inside me thinks that it is the sole truth. The process of discernment requires great patience, self-compassion, and often a good sense of humor. Rabbi Shefa Gold, Torah Journeys.
Thank you. I'm going to stop the share and I'll copy this into the chat. So she's painting two images here, which are perhaps a little complement or contradictory. But what's this first image? And she's talking about our inner world. So she has, the first one is kind of this very orderly image. You know, we have our divine spark, that's in the middle. The other parts of the personality are kind of circling it. Each one knows its place. They kind of all know that the divine spark is in charge. It's like, yeah, that's maybe the ideal case. That's kind of what we strive for in a Mussar practice, is trying to guide the other parts of our personality by the Yetzer Tov, by the good inclination. But there's also the reality, right? And what's that? What's that? How does that contrast with this ideal? Yeah, Bonnie.
So I would love that my life would be like the first paragraph.
Mhm.
I really would. But the reality is, and maybe it was from being a classroom teacher for so long, that I was in charge of the classroom. I heard somebody say the other day, and I really liked it, about saying things only once.
Mhm.
What she said is, I don't know any of my friends who are mentally handicapped so that I have to repeat to them what I said the first time.
Mm,
I thought, you are right on, Michelle.
mm,
Some of you know my daughter is ill, and so I'm on the phone with her often. She lives out of the country, and probably have been on the phone with her in the last 3 months, longer than we've been on the phone the last 10 years, that much time. And I said to her, here's one thing that your illness has done for me. I no longer say to her, if it were me, blah, blah, blah,
mm,
blah, blah, giving my opinion when it wasn't asked. I
mm,
now say, are you asking me my opinion?
mm,
She's 46 years old. She's in charge of her own life. She is not mentally handicapped. None
mm,
of my friends or my adult kids are mentally handicapped. And so this was really, I listened to this the other day at a meeting and I laughed as some of you did. And it was great to hear that I don't have to, I'm not in charge of everybody else's life.
mm,
I'm really working on being in charge of my own.
mm,
So would I love to have my whole life up there? That's a great goal to strive for.
mm.
The reality is, for me, the second paragraph, but I'm working towards the first.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that I love the way you sort of and she says, and by the way, as we work through this, it takes patience and self-compassion and a good sense of humor. And I sort of sense that in the way you're telling the story too. Like, okay, here I am. Wendy.
I think of these moments during our Mussar study. So we have at the beginning, we have a close our eyes and have a very meditative moment of stillness. And the first one is just stillness. But then when we open it up for discussion, we're already good, really good about raising hands and stuff. But what if we open it up for discussion and all of us just started talking at one time? And that's kind of how I see the second one. It's kind of chaotic and not the, like the voices clamoring inside me. And we could probably do a little dance of that with our Mussar class.
Yeah.
It was my sense of humor, guys. You're supposed to laugh.
I was just kind of percolating on my and I'm starting to feel a little fatigued from jet lag, so I will try to keep my energy up here. But it was making me think about just like my, what is my relationship to kind of the inner clamoring voices? And that's something we're thinking about. Our Passover image is the central image of our people, this redemption from slavery in Egypt. And I'm sure some of you are aware that the Hebrew word for Egypt is Mitzrayim, which is related to kind of being in a confined and narrow space. So it's about a liberation from the confinement, which is a slave. You don't have control over your own time. You don't have control over, a lot of things. But, when we get liberated, we get sort of freedom. So the question is, what is our kind of narrow place? What is our sort of area of confinement? And, maybe for some of us, it's getting too caught up in, all of these competing voices or competing demands. Well, let's take a look. Let's get ready to go into our breakout rooms. I'm going to share again. Where is our breakout room? I delete it. Oh, here we go. Here we go. So a quote from Rabbi Zundel of Salant. Lack of order causes confusion, and one whose mundane matters are without structure and order will also be confused in their service of the divine. So if you're unsure of the divinity, you can think of this as serving a higher purpose or your life's mission. And so there's a couple things we could talk about. One is, do you agree that there's kind of this sort of separation between worldly things and things that serve the divine? You could also talk about, how are you at addressing the mundane matters? And is it, are you one of these people that gets too caught up in the weeds, kind of as Bonnie was talking about? It's like, well, I got to mow the lawn before I pick up the nuts. Or maybe it's, I'm so like theoretical that, I don't even like own a lawnmower. So, because I'm in, the clouds. And that's sort of where I'm living. So I'm going to stop the share. And I'm gonna copy and paste this into the chat, and then we'll get some breakout rooms set up. So there's that.
Mhm. Not here.
I don't know if you're there, if you want to join your breakout room.
Tobias, vi posso.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. So, how were your
Mami, gledati.
discussions?
Knjigo?
Is there
A,
anything,
kar si.
anything you would like to share from your conversation, or points you were getting to that you couldn't quite finish? Maybe you want to discuss them further.
Greg, can you mute her? I don't think she realizes that her microphone's on.
Yes,
Thank you.
yeah.
Mhm.
Joanne.
So I guess we were talking about, like, can we have some kind of balance in our lives with the divine and, the sacred and profane at the same time, and it's kind of a balancing act. And sometimes it works.
Mm,
And, I think meditation and things like that help a lot. To be in the world, but not of the world so much. Or,
mm,
but you also, I was talking about a specific person that I know who was all screwed up, basically,
mm,
because she's the wife of a rabbi, but she's not spiritual. And I don't know if she's rebellious or if her focus is just in this world, and she wants to be like a performer and famous, and the
mm,
things that she values are just bizarre.
mm,
So, maybe because I have some things in common with her, like a dance background, maybe I can approach her in some way. I don't know. I'd have to be very careful. I don't want to insult her or anything. But just to understand what is she thinking. Anyway, so that's when we were talking about.
yeah,
And
okay.
take.
Thank you, Joanne. And it's always hard with someone else's journey. We never really know kind of what they're about, but the big issue that you're talking about, being of the world but not in the world, or those are all like big issues, and an interesting balance required. Toby.
We were talking about the balance also, but balance between the things that you have to do or feel like you should do and the things that you enjoy doing or that make you happy. And it's that, I think, for me too, it was a very difficult balance because I always think, well, I should be doing this, or I should be doing that, or I should be doing three other things, or that's not on my list, or whatever.
Mm.
And, so you end up at the end of the day feeling exhausted and like you haven't really accomplished anything because you haven't really enjoyed any of those things because you had to do them. And so our conclusion was that at least a couple of minutes every day to do something that you just enjoy, even if it's just dancing to music where
Mm,
nobody can watch you, or in public for that matter. but just to, it's something that brings you joy, or make art, or do art, or make jewelry, or sing, or do something that really brings you joy, even if it's only for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, thank you. And finding time to kind of schedule that joy and some people advocate time management and other people advocate energy management. And I kind of hear that's what you're talking about. If it's like all drudgery and stuff you have to do, it just drains your energy. But what I think what I hear you saying is if you work in a couple things that you really love, then that gets your energy back up. Marjorie.
Okay. With our discussion with my little group, I kind of came to the conclusion that I am dealing with more of with emotional order more than things, like my surroundings order, with situations that I'm involved in right now with family. And so that's become really important, like valuable to me. It's like I really have to learn how to, I'm in charge of my mom who's 95, and I have to really stay calm and keep my emotions very much in order. And there was kind of a dire situation this weekend with a family member, and it was up to me I had to give this information to my mom, and I had to stay very calm. And so, yeah, just, staying in an emotionally connected order. And also, just say with Passover, for me, it was kind of a new beginning for me. It's a new season and just like kind of starting over again. For me, it's been an opportunity to kind of start the new season again and just keep my pearls in order, and they're beautiful. And the clasp is shiny, so it's a good start.
Oh, thank you, Marjorie. Anyone else care to share? Okay.
Jaja would like to share, but I have to be her spokesperson.
She's cute.
Thank you. Okay.
Well, why don't we do our closing meditation, and then we can take a look at this text for those who are interested in our little bonus Passover teaching. So I invite you to relax and close your eyes once again, and take in a nice leisurely deep breath and a nice leisurely exhale. Just to remember that sometimes the comfort that comes from a routine. At a weekly gathering, we have a routine we follow, meditation that's the same to begin with, and then a question that we discuss, and then some text study and texts that we discuss, and then our breakout rooms. And we come back together and we meditate again. It's that same structure every week. When things are in a routine, we know what to expect. To bring a certain level of calm. Allow us to focus on what it is we're doing at that moment, not having to worry about what will happen in the next moment. I'll just let that sense of calm permeate you. That knowing that everything is happening as it should be happening. And even when if it's not as we've planned, it's still okay. It still happens when it needed to happen. Now we'll take just a moment of silence. When you're ready, you may open your eyes. Well, friends, thank you so much for being here this week. If you're going to sign off, I will look forward to seeing you next week, I hope. And if you'd like to stay for a little bonus study, that is great too, and we will get to that right now. So as I mentioned, this is a document from something that's known as the Mishnah. The Mishnah was kind of the writing down of oral teachings. The rabbis sometimes refer to them as the oral law. And this project was completed in the year 200 of the Common Era. So we're talking a little bit more than 1800 years ago. So let's take a look and see. This is from a tractate called Pesachim, which is Passover. And so this is from chapter 10, and this book is written from right to left. So these pages over here. Can everybody, this text might be a little small. Can you see it? So I'm not going to call on readers. I'm just going to kind of talk through these, and then we'll kind of pause for comment. So this first part is when the eve of Passover is close to the afternoon service. You don't eat until it becomes dark. And this is the part that I thought was really interesting. Even a poor person in Israel may not eat until they recline. And they, which means the community, and the community gives him not less than 4 cups of wine, even though he is supported from the charity food. So what they used to do for this charity food is they would go door to door with like a giant platter, and they'd say, give us a little bit of what you've cooked for dinner. And everyone would kind of contribute a little bit from their household. And then they would take this platter with everybody's contributions of food, and they would go to people who were poor so that everyone could eat. And so I thought this is not part of the tradition today to kind of, as I understand it, or as I've practiced it, to kind of remember that we can't start until even the poorest person, the poor people are reclining, that this is something that everyone participates in. So I thought that was pretty interesting. Let's see. So then we get some debate about when you say the blessing. So then what happens is then they brought before him, he dips lettuce before he recites the breaking of the bread. Lettuce is the greens, right? Dipping it. And then they brought him unleavened bread, lettuce, a fruit spice sauce, which is kind of haroset, although the fruit spice is not obligatory. And when the temple existed, they would bring those things, okay? So here we're seeing some of the familiar Passover foods. And then they pour wine, and then a child asks the father, Why is this night different from all other nights? Because on all other nights, we eat leavened and unleavened bread, but on this night we eat only leavened bread, and I'm sure you're all familiar with this. So on all other nights we eat many different kinds of herbs. Tonight is a bitter herb. On all other nights we can eat flesh which is roasted, cooked, or boiled, but then this night entirely roasted. Okay, that is different. That is a different question. That's talking about when a sacrifice was brought to the temple. It could either be, the meat would be boiled or it could be roasted. Here in 200 CE, this issue of how you cook the meat was one of the 4 questions, and here it was only roasted. And on all of the nights we dip once, but on this night we dip twice. So, and then according to the knowledge of the child, his father instructs him. He begins with the shameful tale, and the shameful tale is kind of how we were slaved in Egypt, and ends with the praiseworthy narrative, how we were redeemed. And he explained, my ancestor was a wandering Aramaean, and then he concludes the whole portion. So Aramaean, that's a reference to Abraham, who came from Aram. So here we have, 3 out of the 4 questions. We have basically the roots of the 4 children. You explain to the knowledge of the child according to what they know. And then there's the telling of the Passover story. So here it is. And then let's see. So then there's some stuff about fulfilling the Passover narrative. Is there anything else? I think that was kind of the main points I wanted to mention. So I thought that was super interesting. Any thoughts or comments? Yeah, Marjorie.
It's funny because during our Seder, I don't know what portion we were at, but I said, it kind of blows my mind that when you think about that we are doing things that have been done for how many thousands of years, that these traditions have held on and held on and held on and been passed and passed and passed. The exact same traditions. I even in your little parsha there, I saw something about the Hillel sandwich. I mean, we
Yeah.
still do these
Right.
things, and it's just like, I mean, it just reinforced for me the endurance of the Jewish culture, the Jewish spirituality, the Jewish people.
Yeah,
It
absolutely.
just amazed me that this is nothing new that we're doing. It was just, psh.
Yeah. Joanne.
Yeah, one of the things I was doing, like on the train coming back from Manhattan today, going through my emails, so I had, a Passover greeting from the head of the State Assembly, and then I had something from the White House, which I had already read. It also had something from Biden, and I responded to it about, Vahisha Amda, like in every generation, enemies rise, because it was talking about the anti-Semitism that's going on in the US. And I said, this is what we expect, that every generation our enemies will rise up against us. But we're the eternal people. We're the ones who are still around when there's no more Assyrians and no more Macedonians and there's no more Roman Empire. And so it is like very amazing, that part of it too.
It is. And I've been thinking, what makes it so enduring? And maybe it's this message of hope, because there are so many times when, in our lifetime, some enemy is going to rise up to a greater or lesser degree. And we have this story. It's like, well, we've been through this before and we've gotten out of it.
And we're going to do it again. And it's like tradition is like the quintessential order. So we have it to look forward to every year. And order brings security, like when we were talking today. And this kind of tradition, it affirms your faith. And I know faith is a thing that we don't study too much, but your faith in what's going to go on before you're going to, so you walk through Egypt, and then every single Pesach, you did this traditionally. And
Yeah.
that's where the hope is from, because it's looking into the future, and there's always going to be Pesach. And Greg, why does it say Pesachim? Why doesn't it make it plural? Because there's more than one entry in it, or
I don't know. It's a
Maybe.
good question. It's a good question.
it's Passover, it's time for questions.
It's always time for questions in Judaism. The Passover, that's one of the things the Passover reinforces. Some
Right.
of the Psalms talk about this too, and I can't remember. It might be Psalm 19. I was leading a nature walk, and we got rained out. We met inside, but it talked about like God's reliability, which we get evidence for in the rising and setting of the sun, and kind of these cycles of nature and the seasons, and that's sort of part of. And the psalmist was making the point, maybe you agree, maybe you disagree, that we can rely on God the same way, that it's in regularity. Stephanie, you've been very patient.
Well, it's definitely about the food. I'm just curious, what's the importance of the leavened bread as opposed to unleavened bread?
Hang on just a second. My goodness.
I'm gonna say something about that. He mentioned
I
it.
was gonna say, I
could
can't
say.
hear them.
Leavening is like, ego. And so we're being more humble, having unleavened bread, the
Okay.
bread of affliction and humbleness. And
Yeah.
Oh, so it's a metaphor for,
yeah,
It's a
Okay, well-
metaphor, but I also think it's sort of, there's a lot of depth to the symbolism of the matzah.
right.
And, in
symbolic,
Egypt,
yes. That it's also, the food is all symbolic.
it is symbolic, but also in Egypt, probably, the Egyptians invented like bread and invented bread rising, and the poor people didn't get to eat that. That's what the Pharaoh got to eat, was the leavened
Right.
bread.
Everybody
So
else had matzah.
yeah, everyone else had matzah. So this is kind of a reminder of, times when we didn't have it so good. And
It also wasn't, part of the story talking about the matzah is, in other words, they didn't have time to leaven their
Right, for
bread
it to
or to
rise,
make it rise.
yeah,
So it's realizing the fact that when we need to go, we need to go.
yeah,
It isn't, we need to
Right.
be observant of what is around us, because we don't always know what's going to happen next.
Right.
yeah. And
Yeah,
there's
and I'm
always-
Jewish, and this is helping me reconnect to my faith. So
Sure
that's
thing.
why I'm here. So.
Wonderful. Yeah. And there's a lot of, there's symbolism for each of the, everything on the Seder plate. And that's part of kind of the ritual, is explaining like what these different things mean,
Mhm.
what they're symbolic of.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts, questions, comments?
I don't know. It's a wonderful holiday, I think. It takes us through our history a lot.
Mhm.
And my rabbi was also talking about how these old Haggadahs, would have pictures of our enemies. It's at that point that I was talking about, including, the Greeks and the Romans and even the Nazis, and now it would have some terrorists in there, I guess. And
Well, I remember in the 70s, where we had the Maxwell House Haggadahs, you had
Right.
Haaretz of the Soviet Union, who was
right, the Russians,
Jews in captivity, and that was
a big deal. Yeah.
it's a big deal. There's also a lot of flexibility in the, room to kind of add, like, there was a call, and some of you may have done this, some of you may not have, to have an empty seat to remember the hostages in captivity this year.
Mhm.
Some people put an orange on the Seder plate to kind of
Mhm.
recognize the role of women, who've been excluded. So I think last year I added something, I can't remember what it was, but it was to remember Ukraine. It was like a certain type of food to the Seder plate. So there's there's structure, but there's also flexibility where you can plug in things to make it relevant to the times.
I just want to share that it was really I've been having some family issues. I only have one family member, my sister, that we're the only blood relatives left, and there's issues, but I don't go into that. But what was really neat is back in the early 90s, couple friends of ours, and including myself, started this Reconstructionist synagogue in the Twin Cities. And I haven't been part of that for a long time. Once I found Jewish Renewal, I was kind of, but here I sit at Passover going, I have nowhere to go. What do I do? And it really was very emotional for me and very difficult, and I all of a sudden noticed that the synagogue that I used to be part of, and that, I led services, read Torah, whatever, they were having a congregational Pesach. So I called the office, and all of a sudden I get this call back from one of the people that started it with me in the early 90s. And so it was like all of a sudden to be away and then find that you still have family somewhere, and that sharing that time is so important. And it doesn't matter who that family is, but because we're all family. When we share Pesach, we're sharing family.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Hi, it's for listening with an open heart. That's really wonderful that you found a place and had a really, sounds like a beautiful reconnection. All right, my friends, I thank you so much for being here. And I enjoy spending time with you every week. And I look forward to seeing you next week.
Thank you, and thank you, everyone, and Chag Sameach for the rest of the holiday. And Shabbat Shalom.
Yeah.
And are we on the next chapter then,
Yeah,
Craig?
we'll be on to the next chapter.
The next week.
Oh, it's just a coincidence that order came this week?
Just coincidence.
In time for Pesach, yeah.
Or was it?
I
Right?
know.
Oh, we'll never know.
Yeah.
I was thinking
Well,
about
next
order,
week,
and
folks, is silence.
yeah, you were
Okay.
talking about
Go,
order
I'm
and
sorry.
like this Va'ad, our group, and I'm like, well, then you must be you got a lot of responsibility being our head organizer here. Thank you for doing this
Thank
every
you
week.
so much.
You're
Thank
very
you,
welcome.
Ray.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for
Agnes.
sharing this
Okay.
additional
I got the
learning.
book. I'm so happy. I want an
Oh, that's
autograph.
good.
You bet. Okay,
Okay.
bye-bye.
Had my